Well, this is where the signal leads. Odd looking place. Well, this shit keeps getting better and better, doesn't it? Well, this looks like as good a place as any to start recording. This thing on? It's hard to get a signal down here. Wonder how they sent that broadcast. Hello again. Welcome back. If you haven't watched my first video on the subject, go back and do that, but if you're all caught up, I won't waste your time. I, of course, am Control, and I'd love to be your host again for today. Just to peek behind the curtain for a moment, this video is going to be at a much more rapid pace than my last one because I have a lot less time. That sentence alone might give away what I'm doing, or at least trying to do, but if you haven't figured it out yet, I won't spoil it for you. The point being, I explained the context of this series in my last episode, so we aren't going to shoot around the solver about how we got here. So grab your nearest block of cheese and prepare yourself for Murder Drone's highly anticipated sequel episode, Heartbeat. Murder Drone's second episode starts off strong with some lore. Despite being almost a whole third shorter than the pilot, a lot of story is crammed into this episode. We start off in a spooky manor filled with glitching ghost people, and Ann butlering around for them. Ann and V bump into each other and share a moment which only fuels this show's dumpster fire of a ship war before Jay thankfully comes in clutch and saves us for having to watch that for any longer. We're then introduced to both Tessa and Sen, but at this point in time neither has really been formally introduced. Im boots up again and falls from the ceiling because they sleep on the ceiling like bats. We see Uzi destroy a mirror with her solver eye before being questioned about it by V. We can see the background whiteboard detailing Uzi's plan to fix up the spaceship, and this little image makes me infinitely more upset that the plot point about her fixing the ship never went through. Technically, Jay does fix it later, but I unfortunately have to report this is one of those times that it would have been cooler if Uzi did it instead of Jay. I know, put your pitchforks away. Uzi gives in his pilot hat and we learn a bit about his backstory. This also never goes anywhere except being an arbitrary detail that makes a scene in episode 8 infinitely worse, so instead I'm just going to choose the more underground detail that in saying I was the pilot kinda calls to the fact that he's the face of the pilot episode, and I was wondering if that was intentional. He was the pilot for most people. Speaking on which, this whole spaceship scene is kind of weird because it's all set up for a series we never got. Murdrones takes an entirely different turn from this point, and so much of what they say is empty. Uzi's whole speech about the humans screwing over the drones and sending them here, and V's line about Uzi's proof of her backstory, are all meaningless to the rest of the series. However, calling attention to V's line and her delivery, this almost completely goes against the big revelation about V in episode 8. But also, the show seems to be trying to decanonize or forget about this scene, so it's hard to tell which to go with. But because episode 8 sucks a fat nutsack, I'm going to choose to take this scene as more canon simply because it happens first in the timeline. It also doesn't make a whole lot of sense why V doesn't kill Uzi despite being alone with her for large stretches of time and she can break out of the chains anytime she wants. This plot hole puts an even larger dent in V's episode 8 reveal, making less and less sense. Once again, I'll cover that as the time comes, just remember these plot points for later.
Yeah, just fix her up, cause whoops, pretty big security risk in hindsight. You got.
We then cut over to the most important character of the series, Frank, attempting to fix the big hole in the ceiling left by N at the end of the pilot. Frank sees Jay's corpse has been moved, and it suddenly turns into an eldritch monster with flesh and bones, and then the solver murders that drone. Can we please have a moment of silence for Frank? He truly was the most character of all time.
Mr. Doorman.
After the tragic death of Frank, we get to see Khan's parent-teacher conference next, which starts to develop Khan's character quite a bit, actually, with him starting to come to terms with the fact that he does actually kinda suck. Oh, and also during the scene where the teacher is lecturing Uzi about being normal, I think it's hilarious that they have those I am not a robot quiz thingies on the board that they seem to be losing it over. We get more ship content with Uzi and Thad, so I'm gonna skip past this. Also, I don't know what kind of shot this is called. When the screen focuses in on the character with this like stylized comic bookish thing, but they're all over Liam Vickers' work, and I think they're pretty cool. It's a shame, and also maybe a little bit odd, how they almost completely disappear in later episodes. We then get a quick scene of the Ghost of Frank, which establishes the Solver's first real power other than raw strength of being a big robot, which is their ability to create holograms. And in a later scene, we see the holograms they create can be hyper realistic. This crime scene is actually really cool and is really impressive for a first introduction of the Solver's hologram ability. The scene is really well done. A plus. We then go back to the parent-teacher conference and see the Solver in the background trying to get in, which I think is funny. And then we get some lore on Doll about having dead parents. This will be Doll's most important character trait later as we move on. In Uzi and Thad, investigate Jay's missing corpse, and we get some brief lore on the Solver and how Uzi believes it's an auto-run program to collect more matter, when N notices a human hand crawling around on the ground, which suddenly grabs a hold of Thad. This is when we get another one of the coolest scenes in the whole show. In fires a missile into the darkness, and as it explodes, the light showcases an elaborate labyrinth of winding mechanical parts that look like a vast centipede that has attached itself to the facility. Liam Vickers said in GlitchX 2023 that this was one of his favorite scenes in the whole show, and it's justified. This scene once again hammers home my point about the last episode, about how this show goes to absurd lengths just to show you something cool, and I appreciate every second of it. At least, I think he said that. It's been a whole year since GlitchX 2023. Holy shit, it's been a whole year since GlitchX 2023?
Liam, what's your favorite moment for Murder John so far? My favorite beat that I still feel like lands pretty well, and I think was kind of a big like oh shit moment, which is always really fun. Is I think in episode 2 there's a moment they shoot they hear some spooky sounds. There's a wacky tentacle hand thing, and they shoot a missile kind of into the darkness of this kind of storage area they're in. And I think the sound design, the animation, and just like every team really put it all together to like have this spooky moment of like revealing this unknowable horror kind of in the darkness. And I think we've done, even more fun, more spooky, more impressive stuff. But I think just that moment as like kind of like it helped me determine like, oh cool, this is kind of what I want the show to feel like I want more of these kinds of moments. So
Thad gets abducted and N saves him, and Uzi wants a frickin' ninja star, but then Thad gets abducted again for realsies this time, and the Solver turns Thad into a hologram. That's like totally stupid, right guys? My good pal Uzi, you agree this is dumb, don't ya? Like, you would never fall for such a stupid trick of one of your allies being a hologram, would you? No, of course not. We established your main character trait as being super smart. Who's a smart Uzi? That's right, you are. Uzi, are you fucking serious? Uzi and N have a sick combo attack and free Thad, and then we finally meet Sen. And oh fucking boy, is she just a piece of work. So many things that are said here completely go against stuff we learn in later episodes, like how Sen says repairing her host is her directive, despite Sen being a single entity that uses the Solver and isn't the Solver itself. A lot of stuff in this episode is decanonized later on, and it's kinda sad. Another example is Sen's power of creating holograms has a limit of only people she's killed, as well as objects, but later down the line, Sen can just make up whatever the fuck she wants with no consequences. Sen really sucks, but that is a super duper uber controversial opinion, and I know I'm gonna have to put some hard fucking facts behind that to get you to see it. This episode is Sin's debut, so there really isn't a lot of information to go off. Her character is perfectly fine, or dare I say, pretty intriguing in this episode. When you start to factor in her appearance in other episodes, she just gets worse and more confusing every time we see her. So yeah, I'm certified as Sin's biggest op. Come and fight me about it. I know if you've watched the episode, you'll probably point some stuff out that goes against what I've been saying, such as Sin's ability to only make holograms of people she killed is false because she creates both Con and N, both people she hasn't killed. To that I say, yes, but why was it presented this way? The entire episode up until this point seems pretty obvious that only people that are killed by Sin can be used as a hologram in Sin's database, which is a really cool idea. And then when we see the hologram of Uzi's mom, we get a sudden uh-oh moment as we realize the show is probably trying to tell us that Sin killed Nori. But then all of a sudden they try to double back on all that stuff just by creating Khan for the sole purpose of scaring Uzi, which is alright in theory, but it would have hit so much harder if Sin had actually killed Khan. Or hell, it would have hit so much harder if our big bad villain actually had, like, a limiter to their power. And then Hologram N shooting a missile at Sin and her swiping it off to the side is dumb, because how does she interact with a hologram? We saw earlier with the Thad hologram that projectiles go straight through them. And if you want to make the argument that, oh, Sin could have projected the missile to the side and have it, like, look like she's knocking it off to the side when she's really not. And my counter argument is then, why does the missile make a metallic clanging noise when it is hit? If you want to say that, well, Sin could have just made the noise, first of all, Sin isn't that smart. She never proves herself in the series to harbor enough intelligence to pull off a stunt like that for something so minimal. But even greater than that, imagine how cool of a detail it would be to have Sin swipe the missile out of the air and it not make a sound. That would be such an interesting detail for the creators to add, and I have a hard time thinking this isn't something that didn't at least cross their mind. They were still smart this early in development. This is the kind of work and lack of attention to detail I'd expect from episode 8. Damn, that was kind of a burn. My hatred for Sin is only elevated as she brutally kills my favorite character. The railgun claps back with a death burst that incinerates Sin and gets the last laugh, but now our show is without our main hero. This is truly the most tragic scene in the show, and I find myself shedding tears every time I watch it. You will always be immortalized as the best character ever written in fiction. We haven't just lost a weapon today, but a friend and a brother. You will be missed. The rest of this episode is just stupid now that the railgun isn't here. Uzi gets upset with In or something. I don't know. I can't fucking talk about this anymore. Fuck this. Fuck murder drones. I'm gonna go play Minecraft. Motherfucker. Maybe murder drones wasn't that bad after all. This part might also be a bit short, since each character either got no changes whatsoever or just a few, so let's speedrun this shit. V is only a main character starting in episode 3, so once again her and her character are both unchanged. Lizzie shows up like once, and in that scene she's kind of an idiot, so we'll add that to her list. And yes, I know that scene is a joke, but let's be honest here, which one of your favorite characters is Lizzie? Anyone? Moving on. Khan gets a lot of improvement in this episode, becoming more self-aware of his actions and actually starting to care for Uzi. Good job, Khan. The only real development Uzi gets is she starts caring for her friends, particularly Anne. Good job, Uzi. Frank gets a huge amount of development in this episode, and he's really important to the larger story, guys. I swear. I was kind of disappointed that the big plot twist of episode 8 wasn't that Frank was secretly controlling Sin the whole time and was the villainous mastermind, because that's honestly where I thought the series was going. The railgun gets a character card just as I promised in episode 8, and yep, it's still awesome sauce. Jay also has a huge amount of character development in this episode. Follow me as I take you down another Jay rabbit hole. As you can see in this scene, Jay's character is highlighted with. Why is she just laying there? Okay, maybe she's just tired. In this scene, we really get to see Jay in action. As you can see here, she's. Jay? Jay? Can you do something? Jay, you're embarrassing me in front of my 3 fans! Sorry, folks, maybe she's just tuckered out. We'll revisit her in another episode. I hope this doesn't become a trend of abandoning characters. Foreshadowing. Now for Sin, I've already spoke my piece on her, but she gets a new character card in this episode, so I'll give you a second to glance it over while we move on. Alright, now finally for Doll. Despite only seeing her in a handful of short scenes, we learn more about her than any other character in this episode. First of all, she speaks Russian, saw her parents die in front of her, has some sort of psychic ability, is a little bit insane, seems knowledgeable beyond any other character, and finally has a vendetta against V. This is a great character setup. It's almost too good. Doll is the highlight of the episode, and she's barely in it. Doll is so interesting that when I first watched it, I thought Doll was way more interesting than Sin was, and here, a year later, I still hold that opinion. This episode is just weird. I think I summarized it best earlier when I said this episode is part of a series we never got. This feels like a Murder Drones episode, but doesn't feel like one of the 8 episodes we have. This episode makes it pretty clear to us that Murder Drones wasn't planned out at the start of its runtime, but instead each episode was planned as they came out. Episode 8 highlights this even more with how some episodes feel disconnected as a result of the entire season not being planned out first. But I can't stand here and say the creators should be faulted for that. If you can sit there and genuinely believe and say that they're dumb for not planning the entire series ahead of time and sticking to it, you have never created content before, much less so on a deadline. People's stories and ideas shift every day, and that makes it hard to create both a coherent story and a story that uses all the ideas you have. So I can't blame this episode in the long run for going against the grain of the rest of the series. However, individually, this is kind of a big fuck up. Almost nothing in this episode is actually important to the rest of the series. Dead murder drones never turn into hollow spooky snake crabs again. Uzi repairing the spaceship never resurfaces, and Sin's intro is questionable at best. I can't say this episode is bad, I enjoyed it, but I can't say it's great either. I mean, the best moment in this episode took place over the span of like a second. It was a good second, but it's still a second. I mean, a second is a long time. This episode still feels like Murder Drones, though. It still carries the charm and the thought behind it. It is frequently entertaining and it expands a lot more on these goated characters. It just gets lost in the greater story somewhere in the middle when the creators seem to have shifted their intentions. Alright, let's break our ranking chart back out again. Overall, this episode still feels like it belongs, and although it doesn't have a lot running in its favor, it also doesn't have a lot running against it, making it kind of a middle zone episode, so I think it's fair to place it somewhere in the middle. But Murder Drones is riddled with episodes that have a lot of bad, but a lot more good to it, and to be honest, I'd rather take the good with the bad than play it safe. So I'm downgrading Heartbeat to 6th place. 6th is the lowest I can put it without a guilty soul, because the 7 and 8 slots are reserved for episodes that are genuinely bad, and Heartbeat isn't one of those. It's just confused. Once again, I may change these rankings in the future, but at the moment I'm very happy with its placements. I don't have a pre-made list in front of me that tells me where I think each episode should go, I just decide as they come. After I've fully reviewed the episode, just to give each episode a fair chance. Obviously, I do have some idea where some episodes go, and any insightful among you can probably see a couple of my choices a mile away, but I still do rank them as they come and try to give each episode a fair shot. So if your favorite episode made it into the bottom rank, your opinion is just simply incorrect and needs to be changed. Well, on that note, we appear to be hitting the edge of our time together. I've got some unknown places to be. Thank you again for watching and sticking with the series. Do any of the dumb YouTube stuff again if you haven't already. And leave me some comments of your opinions, because I love reading them. My next episode is going to be a hot minute till it releases. Once again, if you've caught on to what I'm doing, then you should understand why. But don't miss it, it's going to be a particularly eventful one. Don't worry though, in the meantime, I have some other videos in the works that I'll most likely have posted during the gap that I hope you enjoy. I'll post updates on my social media if you give any shits about that, so I'll keep you updated. Thank you again for watching. I think you're cooler than Sin, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video and my next episode of my tribute to murder drones. See ya.